When we talk about spiritual maturity and the path to lasting transformation, we must begin with a truth that is often overlooked. Growth does not come in the midst of constant noise. Growth comes when you learn to step back from the distractions, the voices around you, and even the demands of people who seek to define your worth. Inner growth over outer noise is not only a choice but a discipline. It is the art of turning away from the applause and the criticism of men and learning to fix your eyes upon God. You will never reach the fullness of who you are meant to be if you are constantly reacting to the voices outside instead of nurturing the voice of God within. When a seed is planted into the soil, it does not make a sound. No one hears its struggle in the darkness beneath the ground. No one celebrates its hidden labor as roots spread deeper into the earth. Yet in the silence, the seed is growing. In the quiet, it is preparing. And in time, that hidden growth breaks forth into fruit that cannot be ignored. This is the image of inner growth. You may not be seen, you may not be heard, and others may not recognize your season of hiddenness, but God is working within you. What matters most is not the noise of the crowd, but the depth of your roots in Him. Too often we crave validation. We want to be acknowledged, respected, and praised. But if your strength comes from the recognition of others, it will vanish when their attention fades. True strength is developed in silence, where no one is watching. When you learn to be content in the secret place, when you build your faith in the quiet, when you trust God without broadcasting every step, you are laying a foundation that no storm can destroy. Outer noise can never sustain you, it can only distract you. But inner growth, nurtured in the silence of prayer and meditation on the Word, creates unshakable stability. Consider how much of life is wasted on reacting to the noise of others. One negative comment can shake a person's confidence. One harsh word can ignite anger and bitterness. But spiritual maturity teaches you not to be tossed about by every opinion. Instead, you stand firm in the identity God has given you. You realize that noise is temporary, but growth is eternal. The wind may blow, people may speak, critics may shout, but the roots of a tree do not tremble at every gust of wind. They remain anchored deep in the soil, silently drawing life from a source unseen. That is how you must be in your walk with God, rooted in the Word, unshaken by the noise. The power of spoken word is undeniable. Life and death are in the power of the tongue, the scriptures remind us. But there is also a season to stay silent, to refuse to engage in arguments that diminish your spirit, to keep your peace when others try to provoke you. This is not weakness, it is wisdom. You do not have to answer every insult. You do not have to explain yourself in every misunderstanding. Sometimes the most powerful word you can speak is silence, because silence allows God Himself to speak for you. And when God speaks, no man can contradict Him. The world is loud. Everywhere there are voices competing for your attention, media, opinions, criticism, expectations. But you cannot grow if you live by every sound that reaches your ears. Inner growth comes when you learn to filter the noise and tune your heart to the whisper of God. Elijah discovered that God was not in the earthquake, not in the fire, not in the wind, but in the still small voice. If you only look for God in the dramatic noise of life, you will miss Him. But if you quiet your soul, if you turn away from the distractions, you will hear Him clearly. Inner growth is not about being seen, it is about being changed. It is easy to put on a show of spirituality, to look strong outwardly, to sound wise with words. But what really matters is who you are when no one is watching. Do you walk in integrity when the lights are off? Do you keep faith when no one is there to applaud? Do you still pray when there is no audience? Maturity is not proven in public display, but in private devotion. And the fruit of that devotion will one day become visible for all to see. There is a time when the fruit speaks louder than the voice. You don't have to announce that you are faithful, fruitful, or blessed. The results of your inner life will testify. When you invest in your spirit, when you cultivate patience, humility, love, and endurance, those virtues will become visible without you saying a word. People may argue with your words, but they cannot argue with your fruit. A transformed life is the greatest sermon. A consistent walk is the loudest testimony. So many people lose their peace chasing after the noise. They defend themselves in every situation. They fight to prove their worth. They exhaust themselves trying to silence their critics. But the truth is, you don't silence critics by answering them. You silence them by bearing fruit. You don't overcome noise by shouting louder. You overcome it by living deeper. Let the results of your life, the evidence of your faith, the power of your character be the final word. Focus on inner growth and let God deal with the outer noise. The noise will always be there, but the question is, will you let it define you, or will you choose to be defined by the unseen work God is doing within you? Remember the seed. Remember the roots. Remember the tree that grows in silence but bears fruit in season. That is the way of maturity. That is the way of strength. That is the way of life that cannot be shaken. Silence is often misunderstood in a world that glorifies constant noise, endless explanations, and the urge to defend oneself at every turn. Many think silence is weakness, an inability to stand up for oneself, or a lack of courage. But in truth, silence is strength, a deeper kind of power that does not need to announce itself. Silence is discipline, and discipline is the mark of spiritual maturity. When you learn to keep silent in the face of accusation, provocation, or misunderstanding, you are not showing weakness. You are revealing the power of control, the stability of faith, and the confidence that your fruit, not your words, will speak on your behalf. A lion walking through the jungle does not need to roar at every sound. Its presence alone commands respect. In the same way, a person of maturity does not waste words trying to prove who they are. They walk in dignity, knowing that the truth will reveal itself. The power of silence is the ability to remain calm when others expect you to react, to keep your peace when others try to disrupt it, and to stay composed when others attempt to pull you into their chaos. That restraint is strength, that quietness is authority. Silence protects the spirit. Words, once spoken, cannot be taken back. They can wound, they can escalate conflict, and they can expose immaturity. Many battles have been lost, not because of physical weakness, but because of words spoken in haste. When you are silent, you create space for wisdom to speak, for peace to remain, and for God to intervene. Silence becomes your shield against unnecessary battles. It keeps your spirit pure and your testimony intact. Sometimes the greatest demonstration of strength is to hold your tongue when every part of you wants to retaliate. Even the scriptures remind us that there is a time to speak and a time to remain silent. When Jesus stood before Pilate, accused falsely and surrounded by voices demanding his death, he chose silence. He could have defended himself, for truth was on his side. He could have spoken words that silenced his accusers instantly. Yet he remained quiet, for his silence was a weapon greater than argument. His silence fulfilled prophecy, and his silence revealed a strength that no earthly power could comprehend. This example shows us that silence is not always about weakness. It is often about trust. When you are silent, you are declaring that God himself will be your defender. The power of spoken word is undeniable, for life and death are in the power of the tongue. But the power of silence is equally strong, for silence withholds words that could destroy, delay, or derail your destiny. There are moments when speaking may satisfy your pride but wound your spirit. Silence in those times is a greater act of faith. It says, I don't need to win this argument because God will vindicate me. I don't need to explain myself because time and fruit will tell my story. I don't need to shout because the truth is louder than lies. Silence also teaches you to listen. Too often, people are so busy speaking that they fail to hear the voice of God. Silence quiets the noise of the world and tunes the ear to heaven. In stillness, clarity comes. In quietness, direction is found. When you stop filling the air with your own words, you create space for divine wisdom to settle in your spirit. Silence makes you a learner, a listener, and a vessel ready to receive. Those who know how to be silent often carry the deepest wisdom because they have trained themselves to hear what others miss. Silence is strength because it reveals control over emotion. Anyone can speak out of anger. Anyone can react in frustration. But it takes strength to hold back, to breathe, and to allow time to pass before responding. It takes maturity to resist the urge to speak just to be heard. The tongue is small, but it has the power to set great fires. Silence is like water that extinguishes the spark before it becomes a flame. Silence prevents damage, preserves peace, and protects relationships. Furthermore, silence magnifies your fruit. You do not need to argue that you are faithful, diligent, or anointed. If you stay silent and consistent, your fruit will testify. People may criticize today, but tomorrow, when they see the evidence of God's hand upon your life, they will be silenced themselves. Arguments fade, but fruit remains. Explanations are forgotten, but results are undeniable. Silence positions you to let your actions, your results, and your blessings speak for you far louder than your words ever could. Many of the world's strongest leaders, prophets, and servants of God were people who knew the discipline of silence. They did not rush to answer every critic, nor did they waste energy on needless quarrels. Instead, they focused on their mission, trusted God with their battles, and allowed their fruit to defend their name. You, too, must learn that lesson. You do not have to fight with words for every misunderstanding. Stay silent, keep working, keep growing, and in time your fruit will reveal the truth. Silence is not emptiness. It is not absence. Silence is full of faith, full of strength, and full of trust. Silence says, I believe in the God who fights my battles. Silence says, I am secure enough not to prove myself to anyone. Silence says, I choose peace over pride. And in that silence, you will find the strength to rise above pettiness, to walk with dignity, and to live with power that cannot be shaken. Silence is a language all its own. It speaks louder than noise. It communicates patience, wisdom, and endurance. When you choose silence over argument, peace over pride, and trust over retaliation, you show that your strength is not in how loudly you speak, but in how deeply you believe. That is the mark of maturity. That is the power of silence. Fruit is always the evidence of what lies hidden within. No matter how beautiful a tree looks on the outside, its true nature is revealed only by the fruit it produces. You do not judge an apple tree by its leaves, nor a vineyard by its branches. You judge it by its fruit. In the same way, spiritual maturity is not proven by words, appearances, or outward show, but by the fruit of a person's life. A man may boast of his strength, speak eloquently of his faith, and convince others with his claims, but time will always expose the truth. Fruit is evidence, and evidence never lies. The power of spoken word is undeniable, for it shapes atmosphere, creates change, and directs the course of life. But words without fruit are empty. It is possible to sound holy but live hypocritically. It is possible to speak like a saint yet act like a sinner. What separates authenticity from performance is fruit. Fruit is the result of consistent growth, hidden labor, and inner transformation. It cannot be faked for long, because in due season the fruit will tell the story. When the scripture declares, "By their fruits you shall know them," it points us to the reality that a person's character, discipline, and secret walk with God cannot be hidden forever. If you want to know who someone truly is, look at their fruit. Do they carry peace, love, patience, kindness, faithfulness, and self-control? Or do they carry bitterness, jealousy, pride, and strife? Words can mask, but fruit reveals. Noise can deceive, but fruit unmasks the truth. Fruit is not produced overnight. It is the outcome of seasons of planting, watering, pruning, and waiting. A tree that bears good fruit has endured storms, survived drought, and remained rooted when winds blew fiercely. Likewise, the fruit of your life is formed in hidden seasons of struggle, in prayers whispered when no one saw, in tears shed in silence, and in sacrifices made when no one applauded. The evidence people see in you today is not from your words yesterday, but from the life you have lived consistently over time. That is why fruit is the greatest testimony. There are those who spend their lives defending themselves, explaining themselves, and arguing about their worth. But fruit does not argue. Fruit does not need defense. Fruit simply exists, and its existence silences the critic. You do not have to announce that you are faithful. Faithfulness in action will prove itself. You do not have to boast that you are fruitful. The results of your labor will be undeniable. Evidence always outlives explanation. Fruit always outshines noise. Consider the farmer. He does not stand in his field shouting about what he planted. He does not argue with his neighbors about what will grow. He simply works the soil, tends the plants, and waits for the season. And when the harvest comes, no words are needed. The fruit is the evidence of his labor. So it is with your life. You do not need to convince others of your growth. Simply focus on your inner life, remain faithful. And in time, your fruit will be the loudest testimony. Fruit is also generational. The apple tree does not consume its own apples. The vineyard does not drink its own wine. Fruit is produced not just for the tree, but for others to partake of. Likewise, your fruit is not just for you. It is for others to be blessed, strengthened, and nourished. Your words may inspire for a moment, but your fruit can feed for a lifetime. People will forget what you say, but they will never forget the evidence of a life that carried peace in chaos, joy in sorrow, and faith in trial. The absence of fruit exposes immaturity. Just as a barren tree, though leafy, is disappointing in harvest season, so is a life that looks spiritual but bears no fruit. Appearances cannot substitute for evidence. God is not impressed by leaves, he looks for fruit. The fig tree that Jesus cursed was leafy but barren, full of show but lacking evidence. That is a warning to every believer. Do not settle for appearance without fruit. Do not speak much yet live little. Let your fruit be the evidence that you are truly rooted in God. Fruit also speaks louder than your past. You may have been misunderstood, criticized, or judged unfairly, but your fruit will vindicate you. A changed life is undeniable evidence of God's power. People may remember your mistakes, but if your fruit today reflects transformation, that evidence will overshadow the noise of yesterday. Your fruit is your proof. It tells the world that you are not who you were, that grace has done its work, and that your roots are planted in a new soil. In every season, fruit is a language that needs no translation. Good fruit draws people near, bad fruit drives them away. When your life produces fruit consistent with love, integrity, humility, and perseverance, even those who doubted you will be silenced. The greatest sermons are not preached from pulpits, but lived through fruit. A kind gesture speaks louder than 1,000 speeches. A consistent walk of faith echoes longer than eloquent words. A fruitful life is the true measure of maturity. So do not waste time trying to convince people with noise. Do not exhaust yourself proving your worth through endless explanations. Focus on bearing fruit. Focus on your growth. Focus on your consistency. In time, your fruit will be the evidence that speaks for you louder than anything you could ever say. And when your fruit speaks, it cannot be denied. Transformation begins the moment you stop measuring yourself by others and start focusing on the person you are becoming in God. Many people spend their lives comparing, competing, and criticizing, but comparison never produces growth. It only steals joy and blinds the eyes to personal responsibility. True maturity is found when you say, I will focus on myself. I will grow in my walk. I will discipline my spirit. I will change what must be changed within me. This focus is not selfishness. It is alignment with God's desire for you to become fruitful, whole, and strong. Self-focus brings transformation because it shifts the energy wasted on others back to the place where change must begin, your own heart. The power of spoken word reminds us that what we confess, we become. Words direct our thoughts, and thoughts direct our actions. But words are empty if they are only used to judge others while neglecting the self. You can spend hours pointing out the faults of those around you, yet remain unchanged yourself. Transformation comes when you turn that same energy inward. Instead of asking, why is my brother failing? You ask, where must I grow? Instead of saying, they are weak, you say, Lord, strengthen me. The tongue is powerful, but when it speaks self-discipline, prayer, and confession of faith, it begins to reshape the one who speaks. When you focus on yourself, you gain mastery over the areas that once controlled you. The undisciplined mind is a noisy battlefield. The undisciplined tongue is a sword that wounds, but self-focus teaches restraint, training, and alignment with the Spirit of God. It causes you to pause before speaking, to weigh your motives before acting, and to surrender your desires to God's will. This focus transforms weakness into strength, confusion into clarity, and failure into testimony. It is not outward correction that brings maturity, but inward transformation that overflows outwardly. Consider the mirror. It never lies. When you stand before it, you do not blame others for what you see. You adjust yourself. In the same way, God's word is a mirror for the soul. When you look into it, you see areas that must be changed, not in your neighbor, but in you. Transformation is born when you stop pointing fingers and start kneeling in surrender, asking God to shape you. Self-focus means choosing humility over pride, responsibility over blame, and growth over stagnation. It is easy to speak of vision, destiny, and calling, but without inner discipline, those words remain dreams. The power of spoken word must be accompanied by inner transformation, and that requires focus on yourself. Prayer without self-examination is shallow. Worship without change is empty. Faith without works is dead. Transformation is not about the noise you make, but the fruit you bear, and fruit grows when the soil of your own heart is cultivated daily. That soil is tilled with repentance, watered with prayer, and nourished with obedience. When you focus on yourself, you learn the art of silence. You realize that not every battle needs your words. Some battles are won by discipline, others by patience, and many by endurance. Instead of wasting time arguing with critics, you invest time in building yourself. Instead of proving others wrong, you prove God right through your life. Transformation is not demonstrated by loud declarations, but by quiet consistency. Over time, consistency becomes credibility, and credibility becomes influence. That is the power of a life transformed through self-focus. Even Jesus, though perfect, often withdrew to lonely places to pray. He focused on communion with the Father, on strengthening his inner life, before returning to minister publicly. If the Son of God valued silence, solitude, and self-focus, how much more must we? Transformation flows from those secret places where no one sees but God, where struggles are surrendered and character is refined. What you build in secret will manifest in public, but it begins with the discipline of focusing on yourself. Self-focus is not isolation from others. It is preparation to serve others better. A vessel cannot pour if it is empty. A tree cannot shade if it is withered. A lamp cannot guide if it has no oil. When you focus on filling your spirit, strengthening your faith, and cultivating holiness, you position yourself to be a blessing. Your fruit then becomes nourishment for others. Your light becomes guidance. Your testimony becomes encouragement. Transformation within always produces impact without. There will always be noise around you. Voices that criticize, people who misunderstand, distractions that tempt. But the wise know that the greatest battle is not outward but inward. The war is not against flesh and blood, but against thoughts, habits, and desires that resist the Spirit. When you focus on yourself, you engage in that battle daily. You take every thought captive. You crucify the flesh. You train your heart to love, your tongue to bless, and your mind to believe. In this process, the old passes away and the new emerges. That is true transformation. The evidence of transformation is fruit. You don't need to announce your change, people will see it. You don't need to boast about your growth, your actions will reveal it. The angry will notice your patience. The bitter will see your forgiveness. The anxious will witness your peace. Transformation cannot be hidden, for fruit always manifests, and fruit always speaks louder than words. Focus on yourself, not because others don't matter, but because you cannot lead others where you have not gone. You cannot teach patience if you do not practice it. You cannot inspire holiness if you do not walk in it. You cannot preach faith if you do not live it. When you transform inwardly, your life itself becomes the sermon, your walk becomes the message, and your fruit becomes the evidence. Self-focus brings transformation because it forces you to stop excusing yourself and start changing yourself. It redirects energy from outward criticism to inward growth. It teaches you responsibility, consistency, and surrender. And when you allow God to shape you from within, the transformation that follows will not just bless you, but overflow into the lives of everyone around you. Spiritual maturity is not proven by noise, but by silence, self-focus, and fruit that speaks for itself. When you choose inner growth, embrace silence as strength, let your fruit bear witness, and focus on transformation within, your life becomes a living testimony of God's power through the spoken word,